Good day, guys. Today I'll be talking about exams of the Leaving Cert and how do examiners technically mark you. A lot of students have always been asking themselves or others and trying to find answers on how do we examiners mark you? Why do you lose points? Why do you gain points? What is it that we look for? In today's video, I'll be talking about this in detail. Stay tuned. So, what I want to talk about is, first of all, you need to know that paper 1 and paper 2 are equally distributed in terms of marks. So you've got 200 points in this paper, got 200 points in that one. There are 4 main elements that we look at when we mark, and this is what the marking scheme also tells you. The first one would be the purpose, the clarity of purpose, and you get 30% of your grade is on the clarity of purpose. I'll be going through each one of them to explain to you what they mean. This applies for both higher and ordinary. The second one will be the coherence of delivery. This also applies for 30% of the marks. Efficiency of language, this is also 30%, and accuracy of mechanics, which is left out with only a 10%. Now, a lot of people think, you know what, accuracy of mechanics is only 10%, I shouldn't be focusing on it. Thing is, you don't have to focus on it if you're already fluent and if you practice too much, because it kind of like sticks to language. I'll explain that in a second. Now, each answer requires candidates to display a very much clear and purposeful engagement with the task set beforehand. You gotta sustain the response in a very appropriate manner over the entire answer. Manage and control the language relevant to the task. You can't talk as if you are giving a speech in a comparative section if it doesn't ask for a speech, if you know what I'm saying. You can't write a short story in a single text, that's what I'm trying to say. And you have to display levels of accuracy in spelling and grammar appropriate to the chosen register. Now, what I'm trying to say is that spelling and grammar are very, very different because you're expected to know them before year 5 or 6. By that I mean grade 11 or 12. The first thing I'll talk about would be the clarity of purpose. How do you know what this is? First of all, for the clarity of purpose, you need to know what task am I assigned, all right? You must respond to it in a certain way that's required, and you have to have a sense of purpose and a clear focus to approach it. Now, we look for a confident and energetic answer that is relevant to the task. And this is the part where you lose points on being off topic. So if I asked you if you liked or disliked a certain character, and then you talk to me saying, I didn't really like them that much, but I also didn't dislike them that much. You're not giving me an honest, straightforward, confident answer. You gotta choose one. Even though if you might not have an opinion, choose one. Or if I ask you to compare and then you don't compare, you just, write something else, you lose a lot of points on that. Okay, now, the next thing would be the coherence of delivery. You have to maintain the relevance and focus of your response. You gotta provide evidence for what you're writing. So if you're arguing or presenting an argument, you need to organize your ideas coherently and transition from one idea to the other with a specific purpose. Okay? Usually purpose and coherence are stuck together for small questions, and language and mechanics are also grouped together for, short questions like a 10 and a 20 point. For instance, if you're writing a personal essay or a short story, you must shape your work into a satisfying whole. All right? You have to we look that you sustain the energy and coherence of your response over the entire time. Like, I don't want you to, for example, if you're doing the comparative, to give me evidence for one character and, provide to me coherence for one, and then for the other one, you don't talk about them much. See, that's not really coherent throughout the entirety of the essay, because you need to be coherent throughout both this character and that. This is just an example, okay? The next part would be the efficiency of language. Now, you gotta communicate clearly and avoid repetition or cliche. You repeat too much, you lose points. I'm not talking about emphasizing a point. I'm talking about repeating, always just repeating the same thing. That, or repeating an example, for instance, that you lose a lot of points on. The problem is with non-native speakers. If you guys aren't native and if you have an issue with English language in general, this is going to be a major problem for you, and you need to do something about it as soon as possible and not wait to the last minute. Because if you're not native, or at least fluent to a certain extent, then you will have a massive issue with this later on. You have to avoid awkward or clumsy sentences. Let me tell you a brief rule. If it doesn't sound good, it's probably incorrect. So if a sentence doesn't sound good, it's probably incorrect. Now your paragraphs must make sense as paragraphs. When you write paragraphs, they have to. Why are you separating them? You gotta give me a reason. So in this paragraph, I talk about this example, and this paragraph I talk about that example. That's fine. If I'm arguing a point here, and I want to argue a new point, I skip a line, and I write a new paragraph, or I end it. So that is very important for you to know. Paragraphing is important, but you need to know, why am I writing 3 different paragraphs? Why am I dividing my paragraphs? What is it that's different from this paragraph to that? Am I talking about one character here and then another one there? Yeah, that's fine. But if I'm just talking about this character here and the same theme, and I'm continuing talking about the same theme for the same example, then I'm not going to obviously skip a line or write in a new paragraph. So if you're making an argument, you must manage connecting words. You gotta know a lot of connecting words. You gotta be able to put them there, like and but and because or whatever. So we are looking for style and control. And the more fluent you are, I'm not talking about spoken fluent, I'm talking about written fluency, the better this part of efficiency of language will be. Now, the accuracy of mechanics is spelling, grammar. This is so important. This is like the only thing that we talk about when I think of accuracy of mechanics. I think of spelling, I think of grammar. This is what I think of, and this is what you should know. And that's why I'm saying it's usually grouped under language, because obviously kind of like the same thing. So before I conclude, there's something that I need to tell you is very important. The clarity of purpose, the first part, the P, purpose, is the very most important criterion. For you to get a good grade, you gotta get your purpose right. Because the moment you screw up your purpose, you automatically lower the scale on all the other elements, coherence, language, and mechanics. What I'm trying to say is, if you get, let's say it's 30-point question. So your purpose is 9, coherence 9, language 9, mechanics 3. So for the purpose, if you get 4 out of 9, you immediately fail, because there's no way. So if you get a 4 out of 9 in purpose, your coherence maximum mark is 4 out of 9, and language 4 out of 9. Mechanics, you can get a full grade, but what's the point? So this is what I'm trying to say. So 4 out of 9 in purpose puts you down to 4 out of 9 in language, 4 out of 9 in coherence as well. So everything is based upon your purpose. So if you go off topic, it's very hard that you're going to pass, almost impossible. So what I'm trying to say is, coherence of delivery and efficiency of language are always assessed in relation to the task. So you cannot get a higher mark for either of them than what you have already been awarded for the clarity of purpose. This is very important, and that's why it brings me to conclude with the following sentence, that understanding the task in paper 1 and paper 2 is the key to doing great in English. Anyway guys, if you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, I'm done for today. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.